A lot of the Warhammer 40k video game catalogue is filler. There's a load of shovelware and there's weak renditions or imitations of much more popular games in those genres. Even one of the more popular titles like Space Marine does very little to carve out its own niche and was recognised as failing to actually do anything new when it first released. More often than not, Warhammer games are worse than similar titles in their respective genres, but utilise the 40k licence and its strong visual identity and theming to elevate proceedings. Often it's a lick of grim dark paint doing a lot of the heavy lifting. But we have to get one thing straight when talking about Darktide. That isn't the case. The game is good, off its own back and off its own merit. In terms of face value quality, Darktide is really up there. It's very evident that Fat Shark are both knowledgeable and in love with the universe and know how to make a co-op shooter slash co-op hack and slash or whatever genre you want to put this into. It drips with atmosphere and detail. It looks the part with incredible environmental design, beautiful ambient lighting and atmospheric effects, an art style that feels cohesive and true to the rich source material. Beyond that, we see a focus that isn't on the expected Adeptus Astartes, instead leaning on normal humans with prisoners and rejects forming the backbone of the fighting force. Each of the classes is rather unique, and whilst gameplay wise they might blur into one another on the surface, the fantastic dialogue written by Dan Abner and truly solid voice acting helps to really enrich the player characters and develop some unique and memorable personalities. All of this in spite of the game allowing you to visually customize those characters. Sometimes you can often lose character and flavour behind a veneer of silly custom faces and bad joke names. The dialogue is one of my favourite things about the game, from crazed German psychos hearing voices in their head to Scottish fanatics dripping with religious fervour. The fanatical cult of the Emperor and the devotion of the Imperium to the chugging war machine is examined on a farcical level through fun comedic delivery that really brings out something that's often absent from the setting, the satire that originally informed 40k.
Enforcers do an imperfect job with imperfect tools. But at least they're honest about it, unlike ourselves. Tolerance is what got us into this mess.
And on the topic of audio, the game's soundtrack is a certified on-theme banger, perhaps even better and dethroning Mechanicus for best 40k soundtrack so far, which is no small feat. It's on Spotify, by the way, you should listen to it. Beyond all of this, the core gameplay loop is immense amount of fun too. Running, gunning, blasting and slashing are all very satisfying. And you get to take control of fan favourites, las guns, slab shields, chainswords, bolt guns, psychic head pops. The vast majority of the weapons on offer are fun to use with a few outliers, and there's enough crunch to evoke the primordial destructive tendencies in all of us. Video game gun go burr burr, smooth lizard brain go purr purr. So with all of this praise, why is this video titled the way it is? Why is it called something like My Love-Hate Relationship with Darktide? Well, for every piece of visual and audible polish, we get fractured, broken product on a more macro level. The game looks and feels the part, but is at times barely functional.
Is bad smell.
Yeah, since launch, there's so much, like, right now, like, texture pop-in, portrait pop-in, stuff that wasn't happening in the beta. Oh, I've crashed. I've crashed. That was happening in the beta. Oh,
alright, we'll hold up for you then, give me a second.
5 minutes later.
In Vermintide, the Grimoire always took a certain percentage of your health, like, say, 33%.
I crashed again, immediately.
This game's
But
great.
Firstly, there's stability problems. Moving from beta to full release, my frame rates got worse. I witnessed more visual bugs, and I crashed far more. Sometimes I will crash as many as 3 or 4 times in one mission. As much as I love the little overly zealous load screen quotes, I don't want to spend my time watching them on loop whilst my party's enjoying their time on the high worlds of Tertium. Technical difficulties are excusable for small teams of developers and, you know, teething problems in launch and all that. I don't want to put the full weight of responsibility on Fat Shark here or pointing your fingers, and I'm not accusing them of incompetence or anything like that. However, this is not early access. We've had an alpha, we've had a beta, and it's now clear that their talents in terms of artistic renderings of the setting and masterful integration of character dialogue into the gameplay is not the same as net coding or stability work. The beta and full release have varied load times across different computers. The same rig, mine for example, will take several minutes to load what it managed to load the day before in less than a minute. So I believe there is connection issues with the servers hidden behind these load screens, and sometimes that can lead to frustratingly long and inconsistent load times. And remember, like I said, the title is in full launch. This is not early access. It was meant to launch back in 2021. And according to Google, the Xbox Series X release was set to come out at time of writing 2 weeks ago. That hasn't been updated. At time of recording, that hasn't been updated. They haven't changed that date. So the Xbox release has come and passed, and the game did not come out. It at least feels like Fat Shark have their hands full right now with stability work and developing and implementing new content on the PC version. There's something not going quite right with the release of Darktide, let's say that. Originally, I planned to get an old group of friends together on the Xbox Game Pass version of the game and play it. My friends I used to play with Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2, who we hardly ever play games together anymore. Some of us have got kids. I've got a kid on the way. But turns out it's just not out on Xbox yet, so that's not going to happen. And let's talk about the Game Pass release on PC as well while we're at it. I was playing the beta after pre-ordering it on Steam. I played a bit on stream when I could stream it. I don't think I could even stream it at its current frame rate. And I was telling people the game was fun in spite of the bugs and the crashes. Release day happens, the bugs and the crashes get worse, and then we find out that Game Pass players and Steam players cannot play with one another. This isn't necessarily a Fat Shark issue, and more so probably a Microsoft issue. They want to keep people within their ecosystems, not have people, go over to Steam. But it just serves to compound the mounting issues with the game's rocky launch. And let's talk release for a second. The servers struggled on release day, trying to reconnect through error messages and just blanket loading screens. And before I got in, I just said fuck it, and I decided to play something else, because my time is more valuable than trying to connect to failing servers. This does bring me to an interesting point that perhaps the demand for the game completely outweighed what their expected wait was going to be. And this is the thing that every single service, every single digital product, every single video game you play has, right? Launch is always nowhere near ready. The servers are nowhere near good enough to hold the capacity of people trying to play. How is this a common error across all things? Does everyone always get it wrong? Or is it just easier to pay cheap than to overpay and then have to have empty servers? I probably think it's more that than everyone's completely incompetent. On launch week alone, Fat Shark needed to launch 4 separate hotfix patches, which is testament to their conviction to get things right, but it's a damning indictment of the sorry state of the game at launch. The crafting system that was discussed in some early blogs and online posts is absolutely absent. It's just not in the game. You can upgrade items, but you can't craft them in any way. You have no agency in that upgrade plan. But you know what they implemented instead? Instead of the crafting, we got a cash money shop for cosmetics. That's right, after a beta that led to a lot of feedback from the community, some of it useful and some of it not, the first thing to implement was a cash shop for cosmetics. And also, a lot of the cosmetics are just better than the ones you get in the normal shop or through the penance system. Look, I'm not naive. I know this is how the industry works at this point. You carve off parts of your game to sell back to the consumer in the hope that they like your game enough to support the ongoing development title through the microtransactions and stuff. Sure, I get it. But your game should at least deliver on its bare bones content and promises and be functional for the majority of users before development time is spent with the implementation of fucking microtransactions. It's honestly a bad look. And beyond this, there seems to be multiple complaints on the Steam forums about a lack of endgame content or rewards for the higher difficulty levels available in the game. The content loop itself is satisfying and well produced, and it's a co-op game, so that does a lot of the heavy lifting. Like, I'm willing to play some shit games if I'm playing with 3 people that I enjoy playing games with. But the number of maps and scenarios is relatively small. If we compare the 5 or so maps to the release of Left 4 Dead, for instance, it seems par for the course for the genre. But remember, Left 4 Dead came out 14 years ago, and it was a functioning full-scale release without missing functionality on launch. This is not the case with Darktide. Each of the handful of maps do get remixed in interesting ways, with mutators like turning the lights off, or the randomization of the enemies, for example, or sending you through the level backwards, giving it a totally different feel. But beyond that, there are currently only 2 boss characters that can show up, the Plague Ogrin and the Beast of Nurgle, excluding like assassination bosses and such, and the weapon selection feels a little lacking too. Many of the weapons you will unlock and buy and upgrade will be different reskins of the las gun, the bolt gun, the sword, the dagger, the axe. There's not really much visual difference with them, with that being more in the cosmetics you can unlock, and most of them being in the cash shop. It's really funny because during the beta I was telling people who were asking me how I was getting on with Darktide in the first few hours that I hadn't seen a microtransaction shop yet. It's funny that it just wasn't there, and then on launch day they're like, bang, here you go. That's what you've all been asking for. The game feels light on features. There's no Power Fist or Chain Fist, other iconic things that you'd expect to be in a game that focuses around melee. There was a super elite enemy similar to the Witch from Left 4 Dead. The Demon Host was added in the last week of open beta, suggesting there's going to be an ongoing plan to flesh out the title with more features and more content. So in summary, Darktide has a veneer of polish over what feels like an unfinished product. It falls into the modern day trappings of video game entertainment where the focus on putting out a launch and driving hype to get people to commit to a service, to invest in leveling up or buying stuff. So then they've got like almost like a sunk cost fallacy and they stick around, rather than the traditional old school, here's a released video game that works. If someone asked me right now, if a friend said to me, should I install Darktide? I would first have to have a really awkward conversation about Game Pass versus Steam, which I don't want to have. But beyond that, my honest answer would be no. Buying in right now, only to have to wait to fulfill its potential over the next year or two of content stability updates, and kind of sucks. And it might just be that you can play it right now and then a patch down the line you can't, because I'm struggling to finish games. I thought I was being too harsh in this kind of pseudo review, so I booted up Darktide before I put the finishing touches in and started recording. And I'm showing you on screen right now, I'm playing, and the frame rate is just fucking terrible, worse than it was in the beta. So I fucked around with the settings a little bit, and that doesn't seem to help. The settings actually get worse. Sorry, the frame rate gets worse as I lower the settings. And then we had a crash. Maybe this crash was prompted by me turning RTX off and on. But I had a crash after a 6-minute load to get in, by the way. So I had a 6-minute load, I'm playing the game, I have a crash. And then, once I load back in, a little bit shorter, maybe 5-minute load, I cannot get back into my game. So my recorded footage was 24 minutes, and only like 14 of that was gameplay. No, less than 14 of that. About 13 minutes of that were gameplay, and the frame rate was shite. Perhaps it's just a testament right now to the games industry. AAA titles being crunched by development teams that are too small, with the ambitions of the publishers or the corps higher up being way too high, and thus the project goes on to overpromise and underdeliver initially, but requires content updates and support to get where it's expected to be. Like, you can let a game mature now, you can let it ripen. It's like buying fruit more so than a video game. I love Darktide. I really like the core gameplay loop, and I love how the game looks and feels, but I hate that it's going to take months, if not years, for the game to actually be finished. But what do you think? Am I being too mean to the game? What are your experiences so far? Let me know in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe whilst you're at it. I hope you've enjoyed this first impressions feel of Darktide, and I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now.